Not right now.
Great.
And I don't think having it as policy changes whether or not multiple people. I'm gonna mention it.
I was thinking.
Have to have.
No, we don't need to have it. I'll explain that.
Good evening. I call this committee meeting of the Northern Lebanon School District Board of Directors to order. First item of business tonight, I would just note publicly that the board met in a workshop retreat session prior to this meeting. We will adjourn this meeting and reconvene that workshop immediately afterwards. Next item of the agenda is public comment. I understand, Mrs. Martin, there is no public comment today.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. Then we'll move on to the items for the consent calendar. We'll start with, Dr. Messinger, I'll just let you run through those.
Sure. Number 4 is our typical approval of minutes, student activity account and cash disbursements. Number 5 under budget and finance, we have an agreement. It's our children and youth experiencing homelessness letter of agreement that we do annually that's listed there. There's nothing for buildings and grounds. For extracurricular, there's some revisions in terms of we've added some assistant coaches for the spring coaching list. 2 trips for you under 7.2. We have the environmental science class trip to Pickering Beach, which is an annual trip. And then the Math Honor Society to travel to the Museum of Math in New York City, which I didn't know existed, but evidently there is one. Under 8 for curriculum, we have quite a few policies, and I want to draw your attention to a couple of them. The first one is 808 is our food services. Now, this is a tentative adoption, and we obviously have time to look at this. But 808.1 talks about student charges, and what they are suggesting is we get rid of 808.1 after we adopt a new 808, where they took some of the language in 808.1 and they put it into 808. But one of the lines that was added was directly out of PA code. And what it states is that students that are not on free and reduced meals that compile a bill of over $50, the school district is allowed to give them an alternate meal. And that is not something that we do as a practice. It is currently in the policy, but it's not something that we currently do. So I'm going to put it in your hands for feedback. We can certainly leave it on consent if nobody has an opinion. It's on there now. I actually would be okay with us removing that, as it is not a practice. Brooke, can you tell us if we remove that, does that bind if we down the road decide to do that, would we need to add it back into policy, or because it's in PA code, we would have the ability to do it? Can you talk to that at all?
You've got flexibility within the code. I mean, the policy gives people a heads up about that, but it would be as easy to change the policy as to implement a new practice, and you could do it simultaneously. The code is what it is. This is the old cheese sandwich law that permits you to give kids a lunch if they're not paying. So yeah, it was an initiative of the legislature at a time when we would have not have said this was a priority. Some districts have implemented it. I suspect some of them have moved away from it, considering how lunches have been handled for the last 2 years. So yeah, I think you have all the flexibility you need.
Well, and you may have seen in the newspapers for a period of time, this was really big about food shaming and the taking of kids who owe money. And I know at an elementary level, for instance, I ran into situations, a lot of times it was custody thing where mom said dad was paying and dad said mom was paying, and neither one of them was actually paying. And before you know it, they rack up this bill. Well, we weren't in the habit of telling that kid, well, you have to have a cheese sandwich for lunch instead of the regular meal. And we went some different directions to try to collect that money, but we did not force them to do it. Neither do we do that here. And so it's not part of our practice. And I don't with all of that discussion, I don't know that I see it becoming one. Certainly we can leave it on there, but at the same time, I don't know. It stood out to me when I read it, and then Director Bucks contacted me too, and it stood out to her. So I thought I'd throw it out there. I would probably remove it if it were up to me, but it's not up to me. It's up to you guys. So yeah, it's up for tentative adoption. So it's not final. You can reach out to me this week if you want, privately, and if we want to move it to a discussion item, we can. If I don't hear from anyone to the contrary, I would recommend removing it for next week. So that's my thoughts on that one. If anybody has anything now, that's fine too. If you want to think about it, that's fine too.
I would be comfortable with removing it. I mean, I want our policies to reflect what we're doing. So,
Practice.
yeah.
Okay. The other one that was on there that stood out to me, and I did ask Stock and Leader about it, and Lee got back to us very quickly, is the in the meetings policy, there's a reference to who can speak. Now, it lists the normal things in terms of being, hey, there's Brooke. Lists the normal things, but at the very end, it says anyone with legitimate business, the board can approve to speak. And it's a very, very vague statement. I don't know what that means, legitimate business, nor do I know that if you want to be in the position to have to make a determination whether it's legitimate or not. If it's a presentation on something that we invite them to speak, then certainly they could do that. That doesn't need to be in the policy. I don't know if you want to open that up to people to, oh, I have legitimate business. And then you're in the process of, you have to then determine, well, that's not really legitimate. I don't know. Brooke, you have any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, other than just to say, sometimes generous language ends up hurting you. There's nothing to say without that language. You can't be generous to invite someone to speak if you want to. But I often find like when there's no legal requirement for it, that's kind of language that typically comes from PSBA. It's unnecessary, and it could look like an unnecessary invitation. You don't want to discriminate in the folks that you provide an audience to, but to a certain extent, it provides for some level of self-qualification for that title. And so I'm very comfortable with it being removed. Many districts don't have that language.
So I intend to strike it unless I hear otherwise. And certainly again, next week, if you feel like you want to discuss it further, we can move it to a discussion item. But I thought the same thing there too. And I don't know, it just kind of opens it up to the stuff that I'm not sure we want to invite all the time, but just my thought process on it. Okay.
Great.
Okay, so we had the policies, and then the human relations. We have a classified substitute for you. We have several leave requests, professional leave for spring of next year, 3 FMLA leaves. We also have a day-to-day sub who will be in a position long enough that he will become a short-term sub over at East Hanover, grade 5. And then we also have another short-term sub that's going to be filling in for one of our leaves. And then under 9.4, we have a couple of resignations, a PCA from Fredericksburg, also a nurse, an assistant boys soccer coach, and another PCA from Jonestown. And that is actually everything for the consent calendar.
Great. Any questions from the board? Any items that the board feels we need to move to the discussion agenda for next week? Hearing none, then this committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Have a productive session, everyone.
Thank you.
See you, Brooke.
Hey, Brooke, do you have $2 million you want to give us?
Let me check. No, I do not. Have fun, guys.